Someone recently asked, what do we feed our cows? Well, today I'm going to answer that question for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Arland Hill out at Harvest Hills Ranch, and welcome back. And today we're going to tackle the question of, well, what do we feed our cattle? Someone recently asked that question. I thought it was a legitimate question. I know that's a question I would have if I was a consumer. I would want to know what the animals that I'm consuming, what are they being fed? So we're going to answer that question for you. And I thought, what a great day to do this. It's winter. We're about mid-January right now. And you can see behind me, it's pretty dreary today. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how we do this during the winter, because to me, in regards to what we feed our cattle during the warm season, the spring, the summer, early fall, that's not really a challenge. The cattle are running on grass and everything's pretty, honestly, from a management standpoint, much easier at that stage of the year. So I really wanted to answer the question, what do we need to do during the winter months? Because it's much more of a challenge to feed during the winter months, and the decision making becomes quite a bit more complex to make sure that the animals have good body condition going into the warmer season again. So with that being said, let me show you what we start off with. One of the things that I always try to do as we're finishing up the warm season is to do what's called a stockpile of our grasses, of our forage. And the idea with a stockpile is that you're letting those pasture grasses grow so that those animals can come back after they've stopped growing and they can forage on that. Now, when you look at these, stockpiled grasses, one of the concerns and one of the challenges with these is that the nutritional quality in these falls off over time. I mentioned that we're about mid-January right now, so typically by mid-January, I'm not very heavily dependent on stockpiled grasses. I've really tried to use those through November and through December, and by the time the first of the year rolls around, I'm starting to switch gears a little bit. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, what that means is that we start to depend on more hay at that point. So let me walk you over to a hay bale that's being utilized right now, and I'll talk you through that process too. Here I am with a hay bale that the cows are working on right now. For the size of my herd, the cows are going, they're a couple of days on a bale. And what I do is I turn these bales up on the end, and it allows the cattle to basically eat down through that bale. Now granted, they're gonna waste some of that hay. They're not gonna eat everything, all the grasses that are in that. But what do we actually have back here? Well, this is Bahia grass. This is the exact same type of grass that I predominantly have in the pastures, and we really took a lot of effort to make sure that we were getting a good quality Bahia. We wanted one that was herbicide, pesticide free. We didn't want any synthetic fertilizers in that. And we were able to achieve that. It took a while to find that type of source. You'll probably have seen in some other videos that I do cut my own hay. I square bale, so that way we can have it for the bulls, for the donkeys. And I do use it with the main herd some still too. When it gets real messy and wet, I don't want to put the tractor out to dump a bale of hay on the pastures because I don't want to worry about compaction. Then we're going to use those square bales until the ground dries out a little bit. But in, later, past the first of the year, I'm really starting to put more emphasis on these round bales, basically because I can get more use per bale and I'm not having to come out every day to feed that bale to them. We still move every day as you saw, and essentially when I move these cattle every day, the way we're operating in the winter is that they're coming back to this hay bale. We'll put them in what I call a lane, which just means another series of paddocks, and as they're going through that series of paddocks, they have a new bale. They're anywhere from about 5 to 6 days on one of these bales. Now, this is not the only forage that they have right now. Again, they're still munching and nibbling on the stockpile, but there's something else that they're using out in the pasture area that I think is worth taking a look at. Behind me is one of the lanes that I was referring to that the cattle will move into next as we keep moving them through each individual paddock in these lanes. And continually move them across the farm. Now, one of the things that I've done in the area that we're at right now, and where I actually did this in most of the areas that the cows are going to cross over through the winter, is we did something called overseeding, which essentially means that we were putting out extra seeds, or we're putting out more of an annual seed. So this is not The seeds that we were putting out were for ryegrass, for kale, for hairy vetch. These are seeds that are 1 year of production is when you're going to get the most production out of them. Now, I do try to, as much as possible, let these go to seed and let the seed fall into the ground towards the end of the growing season. So hopefully we can get some of that back the following year. But by and large, I'm trying to get the grass, the actual blades of grass off of this forage, because that's where the majority of the nutrition is at for the animal. So with that being said, let me show you some examples of how the ryegrass and some of this vetch and forage is coming up through the stockpile of bahia that's left out here. Here would be a good example of the vetch coming up. You can see several plants coming through right there. And then as you come over here, you can see we've got ryegrass coming up through the pasture grass there as well. All right, those are 3 things we do. We use stockpile, we use the bales of the chemical-free, pesticide-free hay, the bahia grass predominantly in our case, and then we use the overseeding, the ryegrass, the vetch, the kale, and there are other combinations that we can use there as well. But there is one other thing that I use that I do want to show you to make up some of the shortcomings and some of the differences here. So what I've got here is, you'll see I've got a feeder there. And in that feeder, that brown block that you see, that's a molasses block. And it's an organic molasses block, so it's just organic molasses from an organic source. But the reason I keep this out is because this is going to be the energy source for the cows when there's a deficit. So meaning that if the forages that they're eating, the other examples that I explained, doesn't provide enough sugar in their diet at that point, enough carbohydrate, there is some protein in here, we do want the protein. All these things are going to be stimulus to the rumen, to the microbes, the bacteria in the rumen, and the more active those microbes are, the more nutrients the cows are going to be able to extract from the plants that they're eating. So we keep this out for them to keep that rumen nice and active and to make up that gap in what the forages aren't supplying for them. Interestingly enough, on this block that you see, these are 80-pound blocks. That block's been sitting there for about a month. And when I bring them out, they're probably not much taller than that. They're a square block. They're really heavy though, 80 pounds. And point being on this is that that's been sitting out for about a month, and that's all they've done with it in a time frame of a month. There's probably still easily 40 pounds left sitting there. So they've probably eaten half of that in a month. They're not very aggressively utilizing this at all. They come by and look on this once in a while. Well, there you have it, guys. The 4 things that we use for forage and for feed during the winter months. Is this the only way to do it? No, it's just the way that I've settled on. I've looked at some other protein sources. I've looked at some other energy sources out there, and just didn't feel good about some of the secondary things that I was seeing in those products. And that molasses block I felt good about. It was organic molasses, it was clean, didn't have any secondary ingredients in there. So we felt good about using that as an energy source. Snowball back here behind me, he's curious. Anyway, long story short, guys, I appreciate you jumping on here with me today and allowing me the opportunity to share with you what we do during the cool season. Obviously, it's not green and sunny. The pastures aren't green, it's not sunny outside today. We've got brown pastures and we've got gloomy, dreary, I've got drizzle constantly falling on me here, skies. So that's okay, that's part of it. And stay tuned. Share with other people, hit us with a thumbs up, share the information, let other people see how grass-fed, grass-finished beef can be produced and how we can maintain high nutritional value and good quality animals. Hey, make sure you tune in real soon again, guys. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Arland Hill out at Harvest Hills Ranch.